Hey, is that better? I'll bet you I didn't have any audio before. Do I now? Hey, there we go. I did not. Now the audio is back. Hey, can I start this over? All right, let's start over. Sean texted me. There you are. Um, as I was saying that you didn't know what I was saying, my buddy Tim is not here at the moment. He's on his way. Um, Note his empty chair, but he's coming back here in a minute. He's on his way. He had to work. But if you're out there and you're listening live, even if you're listening not live, please comment. Let us know you're out there. Today we're talking about some really interesting stuff, something that's been really helpful to me lately, and just kind of going to share some stuff with you. Uh, I do want to say that uh, on Tuesday nights, we've gone 2 sessions in now to our Zoom How to Study the Bible workshop. So if you're a part of that, that's great. I appreciate that. And am grateful for you. I'm going to switch over to the view where I can see everybody's chats, and maybe I'll, if somebody actually comments, then we'll be able to see it. And so if you're out there, please give us a little bit of a heads up and let us know you're out there, and we'd love to take care of that for you. What I want to talk about today, and I'm going to try to keep my microphone out of. I've got a hoodie on, so it's different. But it's no secret. I don't know who's told me heads up, but thank you. Oh, hey, give you a heads up. Got it. And if you're watching on our Facebook page, not our page, if you're watching from the community group, your comment will show up, but it'll say Facebook user. It won't tell us your name. So if you really want to be helpful, put your name, like my name, colon, and then your comment. That way we'll know who we're talking to. But again, if you're out there watching, you're listening, please give us a comment. We'd love to interact. And I also want you to throw questions up. That's why we have this where we can see it now. So that it comes in from YouTube, it comes in from the community group, it comes in from the Facebook page, and it comes in from my page. And so we can see all of that. And if you've got questions or comments, we can interact with you. As I was saying, it's been a difficult season for us and our family. Just been a lot going on. Some of it everybody's aware of. I'm sure some of it everybody's not aware of. My name colon is Bruce. Thanks, Bruce. Yes, it is a very cool attachment. But it's just been a difficult season, and I was talking with a pastor friend of mine and just pour my heart out to him and getting some advice. He's an older retired guy who's been through a lot, and he gave me a book, and we're going to start talking about it. And I'm going to hold it up here. Wait, let me get to the camera. It's called The Red Sea Rules. That's what it looks like, by Robert J. Morgan. So far, I mean, I haven't read the entire thing. I'm just a few chapters in. But I've skimmed through it, and man, it's great, great stuff. And the subtitle is 10 God-given strategies for difficult times. I want to be real transparent with you. Anytime I see 10 rules for, 10 steps to anything, I immediately kind of get turned off by it. Just my nature, because a lot of those things tend to be kind of hokey or whatever. This is not that way. So far so good. It's not been, and it's not very expensive. I think you can get them on christianbook.com. You can get a paperback copy for $6 or $7. We've actually ordered some in. I've ordered 10 or 12 of them in for us to hand out to people. But a while back, I wrote a blog article entitled, and I guess if I was a real diligent man, I would have put a comment. I'll put a link in the comments later. And in the description of the video after we publish everything, that talking about Brenna and her struggles and things like that. And the title of the article is, if God's not real if she's broken. And the subtext of that was real simple. It was that we've had people over the last 17 years of having a chronically ill child, and their efforts are good. They're trying to comfort us, and talk about how The reason that Brenna is the way she is because we live in a fallen world or because of sin in the world. Some have even and asked, just like the disciples did with Bartimaeus, if, we thought that, that she was damaged at birth because of unconfessed sin in our life. And, well, I tell you, that made me really take a second look at some things about relationships, and just, that was a kind of a tough blow to take. But we came to this realization over time after reading Psalm 139 over and over and over and over again, where it talks about, being knit together in the womb, and then trying to reconcile that with the sovereignty of God. And in this little book that I'm reading and we're going to be talking about, the premise of the book is talking about the Israelites coming up against the Red Sea. And so when you get to Exodus chapter 14, they've just been freed from Egyptian rule. The first Passover has happened, and they come to this place. And in Exodus 14, verse 1, the Bible says, "Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, that they turn and camp before Pahaberoth, between Migdol and the sea, opposite Baal Zephon." So what in the world? Well, in those two little verses in Exodus 14, what we find is that God told Moses, tell the people to go to this very specific place out by the sea. Now, God knew that the Egyptian army was behind them, and God told them to go to the sea that they could not cross. And the rule number one that I want to talk about today is simply that we have to realize that God means for us to be where we are. And as you're going through difficult times, and sometimes we're just going through, I don't know if it's relational, financial, whatever, even when it's at our own hand, and I'll talk about that in a minute, God intends for us to be in whatever moment we're in. And sometimes he even brings us to it. That's kind of the contention that we've always had with Brenna. Another guy, this quote in here is really great, C.H. McIntosh. He says, "The sea was before them, Pharaoh's host behind them, and the mountain around them. And all of this, be it observed, was permitted and ordered of God." We live in this culture that wants to defend God's honor a lot more than we should, saying that everything that to us is deemed as a bad thing or a difficult time or a trial or even a time of suffering is somehow that we're out of God's will or everything's not going well. And we use it in our vocabulary. How was church today? Oh, it was super blessed. Everything went great. And we don't do it on purpose, I don't think. I really don't think we do it on purpose. But it's our culture that the blessings of God and the hand of God equates to everything being fine and nothing ever being wrong. And as I study scripture, and I guess the longer I walk with the Lord, it just doesn't work that way. And not only that, we find places like this where you're in situations that you can't get out of no fault of your own. Job was a righteous man before God. And it was God's idea to go into to test Job this way. And the same thing with the Israelites here. They had been freed. I mean, I can't even imagine the sense of freedom that they felt and that they experienced as they left Egypt, and as God's people came out of all of that, following the cloud and the pillar and all that stuff and fire, and only to have themselves led to this impossible, certain death situation. And I honestly, my flesh can see how they might grumble. But one of the things this little book talks about is that sometimes we just find ourselves, we didn't do anything, but we just find ourselves in a hard place. One of the things in the book that I highlighted says, everything changes when we realize the Lord has either placed us there or allowed us to be there, perhaps for reasons presently known only to himself. I don't know about you, but I have trouble sometimes, especially in difficult situations, I kind of want to know what God's up to. I don't know if I'm the only one. If you can identify with that, I really appreciate you commenting on there. I want to know what God's up to. And really it betrays a lack of faith in my own heart. I hate to say it, but it's true. Because in my heart, when we're in a difficult time, there's a part of me that's saying, is this worth it? Is what we're going through going to be worth it at the end? Is the place he's taken us going to give us the benefit, that will outweigh the struggle? And I guess if my faith was what it ought to be, I would take the position of whatever outcome there is, he's allowed us to be there. Bruce says he's been a control freak in this area. Oh, dude, I understand. And I am only recently discovering about myself that through some struggles that we're going in through right now with some family members, that I have always had this incredible sense of importance on protecting my family, protecting our home. And I don't just mean physically, but I mean protecting the environment and the spirit that's in it, holistically. And not just to keep everything safe, but to just, and I don't even know how to say what I'm really thinking, but I don't mind our children and things going through hard times because I know that's how they grow. But at the same time, I have kind of discovered that I wanted it to be under somewhat of my control. Even if I was letting them go through a hard time, I wanted to have the ability to pull them out of it, let them go in a little further, give them some tools, not give them tools to control the situation. I didn't really know that it was that deeply ingrained in me until recently. And we've had some situations where people have advised us to stay in our lane and just let things go. And Tim's coming in now. He's going to join us. And so there may be some audio where he puts his mic on, so it may be a little bit strange here, but Tim's going to come in. And so when I started kind of taking on this idea of whatever situation that I find myself in, good, bad, or ugly, that God brought us to it. And Tim and I talk all the time. I'll put you back on camera, Tim, so that you put your pretty face on because you're fixing to be on camera. There's Tim's pretty face. Tim and I talk all the time about how we say things like, we'll say it like this, like the kingdom's bigger than your situation. Well, what in the heck does that mean? This little ditty from J.I. Packer says, he knows the way that he takes, even if for the moment we do not. Who knows what direction he's really taken us? When we get to hardship, we get to trial, he intends for us to be in it. And Tim talks about all the time and speaks in language like he will reveal himself to us whenever we're ready for whatever we need. And for us not to sweat the small stuff, we have to remember he wants us in what we're in. Even he may either lead it to us. The backstory that you missed was the Egyptians come out in Exodus. They come out of Egypt. I said Egyptians. The Israelites come out of Egypt. And God tells them, go camp in this place, which is at the Red Sea, armies behind them, mountains. He leads them to a place where they're trapped. Like he had them there for that purpose. And that's the first rule when you get to hardship. You've talked about this with setting your kids out and to go into mission field. I know when they were younger, Tim had kids that went into Eastern Europe. And
in Africa.
At how old?
Christina went out at 17, and Sharon went out to Africa late teens, maybe 20.
Did that bother you at the time, or did you just be like, are you like super faith man that just didn't worry about it?
Probably scared Margie a lot more than it did me. But they didn't really ask us, and we didn't send them out. They were already in a place where they were in motion.
Gotcha.
Had been fed that they felt like they wanted to do those kinds of things. I mean, Christine had been going to Eastern Europe since she was 13 or 14 years old.
And they went to Moldova, right?
Moldova, yeah.
Which is right outside of Ukraine, right?
And yes, it is. And it's kind of to the left of Romania, and,
Right.
and Ukraine adds onto the side of it there. It wasn't even a constituted country until like the 90s. It
Right.
was a long time before that, but when it got soaked into Russia, it didn't exist anymore.
Right.
Anyway, so yeah,
Would you consider that though as a hardship or a trial for them, or did they go through any while there, or
oh yeah. Christina went through all kinds of ugly stuff.
Are you-
Physical implement? I mean, she got really sick,
Mm,
and difficulty, and she taught herself how to speak Romanian.
oh, interesting.
That's the national language there, but Russian is too. But she taught herself to speak Romanian. And so you can have all kinds of formal language training, but until you get dropped in the area where the language actually is, it's not just the language, right? It's the euphemisms people say
Right.
and that kind of stuff.
Right.
Well, proper language training doesn't teach you any of that.
Right.
And so she had to, that was a big struggle. Even, me thinking, even when I was in Mexico and in Nicaragua, especially in Mexico, because where we were was in this little town, long way off, and you could tell we were the outliers, right? Because we're the only white people there. Now there's a lot of Spanish and Mexican people that are as white as I am, but where we were, that wasn't the case. And I never really learned how to speak Spanish that well. Margie did.
Right.
I learned to communicate pretty well, but I have a different personality. I can watch how you think, what you do, and how you respond to things, and that helps me communicate well. So I didn't feel like I was outside. But I remember having super anxiety attacks sometimes. I just realized, and maybe it's the military in me or the police that I'd come from, I felt completely vulnerable that these people could get mad at me and snuff me out.
Nobody'd ever know.
Nobody'd ever know.
And maybe nobody would ever care.
And so I
weird.
remember having super anxiety. They just come out of nowhere, and I'm not prone to anxiety attacks. So what does that mean in what we're talking about? Well, God had me there, and he knew all those things were going to transpire. We seem to think that if we get everybody ready for something, well,
Right.
even when we took the church to in Nicaragua a couple of times.
Oh yeah.
I don't
yeah.
even remember, but like when you went the first time and
Yeah. I was
that stuff, we'd
freaked
sit
out.
around and I would, I knew then that there was nothing I could do to prepare you to be over there, right? But we would talk about things, and then after you guys had gone on a term, we came back and there were some other people that went.
Right.
And we tried to do the thing, and all of you are going, same thing I am, there's nothing we're going to say that's going to, and of course, when we get there and they are going through those phases, so to speak, everybody's going, yeah.
Well, and I'm a germaphobe, and I was a really worse then than I am now. And I remember getting on the bus, going somewhere. We rented some buses for that week, and them talking about like the few days prior to us getting the bus, somebody had rented that bus out and was hauling chickens. And I mean, the thing 2 days ago was just full of chicken poop, and I'm just like, "Ugh," and it was not clean, and I'm just, and we're on the airplane. There's this lady sitting next to me because you're going to a different country. They're asking, "Are you sick or anything?" And this lady sitting next to me, and she tells the lady, "I have this really bad staph infection." And so they had to like quarantine her, and I'm like squeezed over in my seat, not wanting to touch elbows. And it's, but the first principle, the first rule of the Red Sea that he's talking about is to just realize, regardless of where you are, God wants you to be there.
Well, it comes down to you could take 2 Chronicles 16:9 and Romans 8,
And we're going to get to Romans.
whatever it is. That God works out all things for the good of those that love him and are called according to his purposes. We read that verse. This is for instance, in those situations, we read that verse and we want to, I don't know, sometimes we just think it's supposed to speak to us, but do you believe it? And are you on the journey to believe it? I think would be a better way to look at that. Because if you're in those situations, especially ministry, you know, I've gone to do a mission trip or whatever it is, and you get in some place where things are not good or not right, you got to make yourself stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you got to go, God knows exactly where I'm at and what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And if my life is taken, he can orchestrate that, and so be it. And that's a worst case scenario, but he's going to work you through what I call your sensibilities, because when you get in situations like that, whatever your sensibilities are, and you may not even know you have them, well, they're going to come to the top.
Well, and I would even take it, one of the things that's been on my meditation time and stuff lately has been, we typically talk in terms of whatever's happening, God knows about it. God knows all things. You know, this doesn't surprise God, and that's how we
say those things, and we
Well,
may
but-
even surfacely believe them.
Well, and even if we deeply believe them, that language of God knows about it, it almost betrays something that we're not realizing is that not only does he know, but he controls.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the kind of the thing that right before you got here was, we talk about this a lot. We have this such a desire to defend God's honor. We cannot stomach the idea that God might actually lead us to an impossible situation. When in fact, we see it all through Scripture that people by no fault of their own find themselves by God's will to be in an impossible situation.
As a side note to what you just said, there's a difference between defending your faith
Yeah.
and trying to defend God's honor. Those
Yeah.
are not the same things.
Right.
And most of the times we're trying, what we're doing is because we're scared to death of what's happening, and we're trying to prove it to ourselves, but we're doing it by saying God does this or God doesn't do that, or
Right.
and anyway,
Well, and
it's valuable here in what you're looking at.
When we've seen it all the time, and people say things like, well, we know that it's not God's will that Brenna be sick. And I just push back and go, I disagree.
Well, there was a time I probably would have thought like that.
Well, same here.
Yeah,
But that's why I was saying, if
that's the learning curve.
yeah, and so even as a family, he either is causal or permissive. Wherever you're at, he's either caused it or has at least allowed it and permitted it.
Yeah.
Now, the second part of that, though, is what about when we find ourselves, okay, there's that side of it that we did nothing to our detriment or our causality. We just find ourselves in hard places. But then there's those times, we've all had plenty, when we find ourselves in hard places because it's our fault. We've done something. David in the Old Testament with Bathsheba found himself in a rough spot by his own actions.
Yeah.
Samson found himself bound to the grinder mill because of sin that he committed with Delilah. But I'm going to read, you like J.I. Packer. I don't know if you like J.I. You know A.W. Tozer's your guy, and that and Oswald.
Yeah, I mean, I like Packard. I've been a long time since I've read him.
He says, there's a quote in here I love. It says, our God is a God who not merely restores, but takes up our mistakes and follies into his plan for us and brings good out of them. There's a shirt I saw one time and I wanted, it said, we have to come to terms with the fact that God's will for our life, whatever that is, that perfect, permissive, all of it together, includes our stupidity. He calculated our stupidity into what he wanted to do for us.
Well, and we think our stupidity is, I don't know, in my walk, I can look back now in places where I can watch his hand working, even when I messed it up. So that's really the only way that we can measure and accept whether God was really working that or he wasn't.
Yeah.
And how does he work? So I was thinking, everybody knows this story, but I think it's in leading and building. So God is in the building business too, right? He equips us to do what he wants us to do, and his vision's so far out there, he's looking way down the road. not in this unobtainable thing. He knows exactly how long it's going to take us to get to some point or another. And for our benefit, he puts us in these conditions in these places. So you're talking about the Israelites coming across and going across the Red Sea. So everybody knows who Joshua was, and Moses was his mentor and his right hand, or Joshua was the right hand. And we have to think about what that looks like, because we're talking about practicality here. How does God work? Well, so Moses pitches the tent outside the camp, and it's important to grasp the scope of that. That's 1 million plus people out there. This was a big camp. This wasn't like 25 people in a small area. And it says that Moses took it upon himself after the tent of meeting had done. He pitches that thing outside the tent, and it says that when everybody would go out there to worship and seek things and all that, but when Moses went out there, it says that when he would get up to go to the tent of meeting, whether he was called or he was just going, everybody, this 1 million plus people, would be on the edge of their seats watching what was going to happen. It's a lot different than anybody else going out there, right? And their anticipation is when he went, he'd walk in and the pillar of cloud comes down and nobody can come up around that. Yeah. It's kind of like you're locked out, so to speak. And they were on the edge of their seats because they knew when he came out, he was going to have a word from God, right? So you have this, I'm painting this picture. Yeah. It's not about Moses in the cloud. This is about Joshua. Well, Joshua used to go down there when he went too, but he stayed outside the tent, I guess around, who knows I don't know how big this pillar of cloud was or anything. And people say, well, they were all in tents because the cloud was coming down. Like it's this miracle, and if we get the right miracle, we're going to be online. That's a whole nother conversation. But anyway, Joshua's, and it says that when Moses would get done talking to God and come out and go do what he was going to do, Joshua would linger there, hang out, right? So fast forward, when Moses is dead and Joshua's in charge of everything, God hands him the mantle, so to speak, and God gives him this pep talk: have courage. By the way, did I tell you to have courage? Oh, have courage. Chapter 1. Yeah. And you might start thinking, well, if you're really intelligent, you're going to start thinking, I might be fixing to come into some difficult stuff here. Anyway, this is all falling into this, right? God's preparing him for something, right? He comes to Jericho and he has a panic attack because him and Caleb are the only real warriors at this time. All the rest of them died off. And he's got a green army. Yep. That has seen very little conflict if you start looking through the timelines. And this Jericho thing, he starts sweating the load. Now, this is a guy who's walked with God and seen things and seen great things, but now he's in this anxiety moment, right? And this is the deal where he goes up and he sees the angel. Right. He sees this angel, and it says that when he saw him, he had enough wherewithal to understand he wasn't one of them, and he probably wasn't from Jericho. He knew what the army looked like, but he asked the guy, you for us or them? And when the guy says, I'm not for either one, I'm in charge of the Lord of Hosts. If you want to know what the Lord of Hosts looks back, go look at Elisha and Dothan. Anyway, it says that he fell on his face. Yeah, as a dead man. Well, no, I don't know. Not that time. It doesn't say he's a dead man. He fell on his face and he said, tell me what you want me to do. Yeah. It's not because he saw this miraculous sight. Because he saw the miraculous sight, he didn't fall on his face. He heard the voice. You know where he heard that voice first time? Standing outside that tent. Standing outside the tent. God built that situation because he was already looking over here. Yeah. That goes in the New Testament too. My sheep know my voice. Right. God, you say, well, okay, well, he did that because Joshua was always doing what God wanted him to do. I'm in the ministry and I'm doing God stuff, so he's going to work with me. He's working with you all the time anyway. Right. Well, and I know that even translates into when after the resurrection in the garden, when Mary sees Jesus and doesn't recognize him until he speaks. Yeah. And he says, Mary, and then she knew who he was. Yes. And, there's debate about, well, he was hiding his whatever. The text reads, she didn't recognize him until she heard his voice. And it all ties into
And something that I say all the time is the way that we recognize his voice is to spend time listening to it. I saw a great meme the other day.
Yeah.
I saw a great meme the other day that said most Christians don't have fellowship with God. They have fellowship with people as they talk about God. And dude,
That's
that
great.
It hit me in the face, and I was like, that is so true. And fellowship with people talking about God is great, but it is a terrible substitute for fellowship with God.
Yeah.
And this first chapter of this little book is understanding that God has you where he wants you to have you. Sometimes it's not your fault, but sometimes it is.
Yeah.
Sometimes David made choices and endured consequences. Well, his descendants are still doing it.
He suffered big consequences.
And so the consequences may linger. But one guy, I don't know who this guy is. His name was Sidlow Baxter. I'm assuming he's somebody that somebody knows from somewhere. Anyway, he said there's a compassionate adaptability about God's will for us. And I love the way he said that, an adaptability, because we spend a lot of energy going, am I in God's will? Am I doing God's will? If you're seeking his face, you're doing his will. We get bent out of shape about whether we should go left or go right. And I'm not saying God doesn't direct that way. Sometimes he does. But most of the time, what he's really wanting us to do is follow the cloud. Well, but what if I go into a valley where there's a sea and there's mountains and there's an army behind? What if I get into that space? He's like, just follow me. Yeah. That's what's important. And then he goes on to say, because we have not been in God's special will from the beginning, there's no reason why we shouldn't get into it now. Like, in other words, he'll meet you where you're at, wherever you're at, just come to him, and he's like, okay, here we go. Now we can work with something here. It makes a lot of sense to me.
The thief on the cross would be a perfect example of that.
Yeah. Another guy, Tim and I like to read old guys that are dead.
Yeah.
He said, when God fixes our position for us, we may rest assured that it was a wise and salutary one. And even when we foolishly and willfully choose a position for ourselves, he most graciously overrules our folly and causes the influences of our self-chosen circumstance to work for our spiritual benefit. Romans 8:28. A lot of people glom onto Romans 8:28 and they read it like this: all things work together for good for them that love God and are called according to his purpose. But the way they really read it is all things will turn out the way we think they ought to.
Oh, yeah.
For those who love God and are called according to his purpose. Or they read into it, all things like suffering and trial will come out good in the end and will end and stop for all those who are called according to his purpose. That is not what it reads. The reason for Romans 8:28 is whatever it is that God leads us to, whatever it is that he allows us to go through, or whatever it is that we bring ourselves to through sin and folly, he's already calculated all of that into the great algorithm that is our spiritual definition and our spiritual journey. Yeah. He's already done it. And I like the way he talks about this compassionate adaptability, because there's this line of thinking, they call them determinists, that because God is sovereign, that every step is ordered and you can't choose anything. Even your sin is chosen for you and you're going to do it. I just don't see that in Scripture, number one. I see God changing his mind. I see Moses challenging God on the mountain and the Lord relenting of destroying the people. I see a compassionate God that takes a situation. It's not that it surprises him. It's not that he didn't know about it, but he's already working it into it. And so the encouragement, and I'm looking at the time, the encouragement that I pulled out of this was I do pretty well in trusting the Lord with situations that aren't my fault. Oh, it's just God's will, he's leading us through a valley and here we go, and I do well there. When I suck is when it's my fault and I'm looking in the mirror going, I do the Eeyore thing. Oh, it's me, it's my fault. This thing's going to come off the rails because I'm an idiot. And, oh no, my kid's this, whatever, fill in the blank. it's a lot harder for me to step back and go, even when I'm an idiot and lead myself into the valley, I'm still where he wants me to be because I've got something to learn out of that, something to repent of, more to learn of him, even when it's my fault. Does that make sense?
No, that makes perfect sense. But it's still, we're so linear that we come back and we go, okay, well, then he orchestrated that. Maybe he did, but there's a freedom of movement that doesn't phase God. I hate to use the term a fork in the road, but I don't really know how else to best do it. He brings you up to that and he lets you decide which one you're going to go. If he hasn't led specifically which one of those you should go, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And whatever transpires out of that, it doesn't mess up where it is that, remember now, each one of us are built unique. That's where we get lost.
Yeah.
Because we're always trying to type and find and do, because then we can make the plan perfect and all that stuff. And there's nothing wrong with any of that, really, except for the fact that he knows exactly every molecule in you and has put your personality in there.
Yep.
And so anything you do and decide and move, right or wrong, sometimes it's hard to decide which one that is. I'm not talking about blatant sin stuff. I'm talking about, did I make the right move, or I did this?
Did I take the right job? Did I?
Yeah, and I did this job thing and it went down the toilet, so I must have been out of God's will.
Okay.
He can take all that stuff and go, okay, no worries. I'm going to still swirl this one around to get to where we're going with you.
Well, and what it really betrays in us is a lack of understanding and a lack of faith in his ability. An analogy I would put, like, if you're married, you'll understand this. You get ready to go out to eat somewhere. Where do you want to eat? You know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And here's the way it works in our world. My wife's going to say, "Where do you want to go eat?" And this is what, early in our marriage, I would be like, "I don't care. We go back and forth for 30 minutes." Well, what I've learned is I really don't care. She really does care, even when she says she doesn't. So I'll just start throwing out stuff I know she doesn't want to do. Let's go eat Chinese food. No, I don't want to do that. Let's go eat a greasy hamburger at so-and-so. No, I don't want to do that. And even more so, I can say, all right, here's 3 options that I'm willing to do. Which one do you want to do? Okay, and so we've learned how to do this. But my analogy for what we're talking about is simply this. Wherever she picks to eat, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm not that discriminatory. I'm hungry. Okay. And I'm over here really going, hey, whatever you decide, I will make good of it. And that's the way I think about God on a lot of our decisions that we get tied up on.
Yeah.
He's like, just go. What did he tell Abraham with Lot? He got to this place and Abraham said, go left or go right. I'll go the other way.
Yeah.
And I think if Abraham had gone the way of Sodom and Gomorrah, it would have read different, but there would have been a different story to tell. And God's not up there going, ooh, I hope he chooses left. I really wanted him to choose left. He's not listening. God's not doing that.
He's not bound up by that kind of stuff. He's not.
And he may actually want you to take the left-hand decision and you take the right. And he's like, well, this is going to be a little bit harder path, but that's all right. We'll work that, and it's something that he does. And we get so bound up about, well, I made the wrong choice. If we're pursuing him outside of blatant sin, there isn't a wrong choice.
Well, and you said something a while ago, and then we can probably finish this up, but that it's because we don't know him, we're not familiar with him.
Yeah.
Well, but I would say that, but not you didn't say it condemningly, but we take it like that because at least in the Christian teaching world, that's an easy thing to say. And so people immediately go, oh man, even if they've been pursuing, I don't know him. No wonder I can't see what he's doing. He knows that.
Yeah. And I don't mean that salvifically either.
Right. And that's what I'm telling you is that he knows that. And you learn that as you go.
Yeah.
The same way you learned how to throw out whatever you needed to do so that y'all could find the place to eat. And I have the same thing in mind. And actually, I want to do what she wants to do. And then she'll go, well, I want to go here. I want to go to Taco Bell. Oh. If I go to Taco Bell, I have to take a toilet with me when I go, right? But if she wants to go there, I am that's where I'm gonna go.
Well, because being with her is the goal.
Yes, that's
And
the point.
And that's really,
And God is a whole lot that away too.
yes, except our goal is to be with him, and he knows that, and he knows that's what our ultimate good is to be with him. And that's where he's going to, and not just to be with him, but to know him and to trust him. That was the whole point of the Red Sea.
Yeah, and that's just learning. He
The-
knew that.
Next week, we'll jump into the second chapter, which is a really good one too. But the title of it is, the second rule is to be more concerned for God's glory than for our own relief.
Yeah.
When it's talking about dealing with hard times. So we'll pick that up next week. And it's again, it's Exodus 14. That one's going to do with verses 3 and 4 if you want to read ahead. But as far as announcements go for the ministry, I'm going to be speaking at Crossbrand this week again. I'm excited about that. It'll be Sunday and Wednesday. I'll be speaking there. Are you speaking anywhere this week?
I don't know yet.
Okay,
I've been teaching
maybe.
at Fruitvale on Wednesdays, but that's a week to week thing.
Okay. But and if you're involved in our Tuesday night Zoom class for how to study the Bible, be sure to see you there at 7:00 on Tuesday. If you missed that, we'll probably do another one here maybe in late summer and maybe early fall. We'll do another one. We're learning a lot about doing it in this format. This is something new for us, and so bear with us. But I can't think of anything else. You got anything? Guys, I appreciate y'all watching today. Appreciate you tuning in. And get you this little book. Christianbook.com has them for $6 for paperback. Red Sea Rules. 10 God-given strategies for difficult times. Again, I hate stuff that says 10 blah, blah, blahs. I hate that kind of stuff. But this has been really good, really helpful. And that's what we're going to be going through. We'll see you guys later. Appreciate y'all joining us. Later.